And we're on.
One of the highlights of my very young life was a trip with my uncle. It was my great uncle, my grandfather's brother, who was a veterinarian, and it was up to Foresgate Farms. I finally remember the name of it. Up above Burlington. And it was right along, the turnpike wasn't built, but it's right along the turnpike. And if you go up there now, you can see where it was because it's so close to the turnpike. And now it is a retirement home for over 55. But at the time, the Foresgate Farms had a rotolactor, which was a large, very huge circular building where they put the cows, entered the cows in one entrance, put them in the position on the rotolactor and milked them by electronic milking machines. And it went slowly around, and I don't know how many revolutions they make, but I don't think more than one or two. And when they were done, they let the cow out back into the barn, I guess, another exit. Anyway, there was a cow that had a calf, and she had never expelled her afterbirth, and she was in trouble. So my uncle had to go up there, and he wanted to know if I'd like to take a ride, which I did, and I went up with him. And he took their cow was locked in, on the rotolactor, wasn't working then, and she was locked in position there. And he took his arm and put grease all over his arm, all the way up to the elbow, and rolled his sleeves up, of course. And the next thing you know, he went in the business end of the cow, and you could see his arm was moving a little bit, but and he would look at me and I'd say, "What are you doing, Uncle?" And he said, "I'm unbuttoning things. It's just like a row of buttons." He said, "I'm unbuttoning to get rid of this." And he took about 15 minutes, and he took it and it plopped it in a bucket, and then of course he went and washed himself. I was only around 6, and that absolutely fascinated me, and I will never forget it. And of course the rotolactor was world famous at the time. They even had postcards that they sold of it. So that was one of the highlights of my early childhood. Now we'll get back to, we're going to go to China.
Well, before we do,
Okay.
did you have any role models when you were growing up in Morristown?
You know, role models were not in vogue then.
So your mother was the closest thing to a role model you had?
And we just was doing what comes naturally.
No movie star you really...
There were certain movie stars everybody liked, the big top stars. And we did go to the movies a lot.
Nobody in any of the books that you read about, a role model that you would particularly
Not
admire?
really, no.
I'm fascinated by you always wanting to be a cruise director. Did you read a book about that, or know somebody, or see a story about it? What made you think that was?
I wanted the social end of it, to tell you the truth, because I realize it's a lot.
But
of
on
hard
a cruise
work.
liner, not like at a campground or someplace.
Yeah.
It had to be at sea.
Let me tell you, that's a lot of hard work, though. I can tell you that. My daughter Laura, found that out, but she was a professional guide. She said, "You're on all the time."
Yeah. How about mentors? Did you have any mentors when you were in high school? Some adult other than your parents that took a particular interest in you? Or?
No, I don't think we were sophisticated enough in those days to even bother about mentors. We didn't have that kind of life. If you had a struggle, like if your parents were getting a divorce or something, you usually might have found somebody in the family or elsewhere who could be a mentor and help you out. But we didn't have that. Divorce was unknown, literally unknown.
You didn't have any like favorite aunts or uncles or somebody that was...
I loved my Uncle George. That was my mother's brother. He was a wonderful person. Everybody loved him. He was one of these people who could go anywhere in Morristown and everybody knew him.
What did he do for a living?
And he loved everybody.
What did he do for a living?
He was a mailman.
Oh, so he knew everybody. Huh?
And he loved children, and children loved him.
Now this is your mother's brother?
My mother's brother, the middle brother, was with my Uncle Wilcher. He was the antiques dealer. And then 2 years later, my Uncle George, and then my mother 2 years later. 3 of them altogether.
So, is there any individual who had the greatest impact on you and the choices that you made?
I guess my grandmother and my mother and father more than anything. They were very good parents.
Did they
Very
tell you what
stable.
kind of? Did they tell you what kind of man to look for if you were going to get married, or who to
I
avoid?
never
What
even
kind to
thought about
avoid?
that.
No, never talked about that.
No. I met so many men. I don't
Oh
know
no,
how I
we're
even
going to get
made
to
a
that. We're going to
choice.
get to that. Who were your best friends growing up until before you
Well,
went to
my
China?
one best friend is still living. Her name's Nancy Frolicher, Frolicher. She lived 2 doors down. She was 6 months older than I am, and we were bosom buddies. I have pictures of her, and she now lives in the Evergreens. Not what's that called?
The
Yeah,
one in
that's
Morristown is called
Morristown,
Evergreen.
Evergreens, yeah. But I haven't seen her because of the coronavirus.
That's sad.
I've talked to her on the phone. She was my very best friend. And then we had a family, the Frasiers, Frasier. No Z, Frasier. They lived in the great big Victorian house, and they had 3 boys and a girl. They had an older boy, but he was older. He was working. And we had so much fun. They were so inventive, all of them. And they made forts and dugouts, and we had a Tarzan swing and all that kind of stuff, And we slept out in the tent. Oh, and I thought that was great.
What was the Fraser's girl's name? Your
Pardon?
friend? What was the girl who lived there in that family? Who was your friend?
It was only one girl, Ruth.
Ruth. And
But
did you keep in touch with her?
She was older. She would be 93. I don't even know whether she's living. She moved to California. She married a fella from California. And I
Lost touch with her then?
I lost touch, yeah. And her mother was wonderful. A brilliant woman. And here she had 5 kids. And she was constantly, had books piled everywhere, constantly reading. And one Christmas, we always used to go and see what everybody else got for Christmas. And one Christmas, Ruth said, "Come on up and see our television set." She said, oh, and they were all excited because it was the first television. "Oh, it's wonderful. Come up and see it." And I came up and see it. And she pointed, and there, in a bookcase, was the Encyclopedia Britannica. That was their television set. Her mother was brilliant, unbelievably brilliant. And then she never even graduated from high school.
But Nancy was probably your best friend?
Yeah, Nancy was closer to my age.
And what did you enjoy doing most together with Nancy?
What would we do?
What did you enjoy most doing with her?
Oh, we played paper dolls, and we played croquet, and they had chickens, and her mother could drive, and we went on little rides. This is before the war, of course. And we had a very nice time. They were very nice, the whole family, very nice neighbors. And everybody, we didn't have I don't know whether they weren't, I can't explain it. We didn't have the hang-ups and the stuff and everything that people have today. We didn't have the psychology that people have today. We just lived every day the best way we could. We didn't have the same philosophy. It's hard to explain, but
other than the war starting, you don't remember any major disruptive events in the town or big events that occurred while you were growing up? Probably.
no, it was a very comfortable, rather serene life. I would actually. I mean, the one big event was when they moved the house, a Victorian home that was right next to where my uncle lived on Main Street. They moved it down to next to the Christian Science Monitor Church. And that was a big deal. Unfortunately, we were in China and missed the whole thing. But I'll tell you, that was really something back in those days. That was 1947. And it's still there. The house is still there.
So tell me what happened, what you were doing when your mother told you, oh, by the way, now we're going to go move to China. Do you remember that event? How that...
What?
Do you remember when your mother told you were going to move to China?
No, not really. I'm sorry, I can't help you. But
Well, how did you feel when you heard that?
we were excited about it.
You weren't sad you were going to be leaving your high school and your
No,
friends? No?
No, not at all. No. We were excited. We thought it was a real adventure. And what did we know? We didn't know anything, about that country. We knew about the war, of course. But yeah, we were kind of excited about it, I would say. And but we didn't know what to expect. You couldn't imagine it. In other words, you didn't know what was going to happen.
Do you remember how you made it across country and then
We didn't make it across country going to China.
how you went there? What ship where you got it?
We went to Norfolk. And we have a picture, you saw, of us sitting on our front steps.
You took the train to Norfolk, right?
No.
No?
We
Bus?
were picked up by a Navy bus.
Here.
Here, right by our front door. Right?
And the Navy bus drove you to Norfolk.
We went to Norfolk, and we got on the Mitchell, USS Mitchell, and all the dependents who were going wherever they were going got on there, and then we went down through the canal, and we dropped off, every place we stopped, we dropped off dependents somewhere.
Did you stop anywhere on the way to the canal?
No, we went straight down to the canal,
Did anybody get on or off in the canal?
and then we had a bunch of people get off the canal.
Was it very hot when you were there?
No, it wasn't. It was rather nice. As a matter of fact, now it was July when we left, July of '47, but it wasn't hot. But it was one of the most fascinating things I'll never forget. Because we got there about 8 o'clock in the morning, and of course we stood on deck and watched. And it was absolutely fascinating, unbelievable. Have you ever been through the canal?
I have been to Panama City, but I never went through the canal.
Oh. So anyway, I stood there on that deck from about 8 o'clock in the morning. And the next thing you know, and I'm not exaggerating, my sister came out at 6 o'clock that night and said, aren't you going to come in and eat something?
You were out there the whole time. You were so fascinated.
I didn't even stop to go to the bathroom. I was out there the entire time, and it seemed like I had been out there for maybe an hour.
There were a lot of locks to go through, weren't there?
It was fascinating.
You go up and then you go down.
Yep. And we ended up in Lake Gatun, So anyway, it was one of the most fascinating things. I'll never forget that. That was a wonderful experience.
And then where did it leave once it
well,
went
once
up
it got through
Cristobal?
the canal?